Hello, Luke and I would like to welcome you to my Emperor's Throne Room toy box. In this video I'm going to share the music note creator and metronome settings that I used to add the first 4 bars of the Imperial March, or Vader's theme as it's also called, to my toy box. This is based on Professor Toybox's Toy Box Tutorials, episode 108 for the music note creator and episode 109 for the metronome. Then I'll provide a short demo of how I integrated this short piece of music into my toy box, followed by a tour of the toy box. The music note creator and metronome are logic toys that I was never able to figure out until the professor published his tutorials. I hope this video will provide another good example of how you can use these toys to add a fun dimension to your toy box creations, such as this section of the Imperial March that I created for my toy box. This is the piece of sheet music for the Imperial March that I found on the internet. As indicated by the marked area, I used the music note creator and the metronome to create the first 4 bars of the song. Using the formula that the professor provided in his tutorials, I determined that based on a speed of 120 beats per minute at 4 beats per bar as indicated by the upper number 4 at the beginning of the first bar, that each bar is 2 seconds. But as the professor pointed out, the minimum time bar duration in the metronome settings is 4 seconds. Therefore, I needed to combine 2 bars at 2 seconds each into 1 bar to comply with the metronome's limitation of 4 seconds per bar. I used 120 beats per minute for convenience to make the math simple. However, the actual speed of the Imperial March is 103 beats per minute. But at 120 beats per minute, which equates to a time bar duration of 4 seconds, the metronome plays the notes too fast. To correct this, I set the metronome's time bar duration to 5 seconds, which reduces the speed of the metronome closer to 103 beats per minute for my piece of music. The formula will get you close to the correct settings, particularly if you're simplifying the math as I did, but as I discovered, you can use the time bar duration setting to speed up or slow down the metronome to fine-tune the speed of the music that you are creating. Alright. Let's take a look at the settings and logic connections I used to create the first 4 bars of the Imperial March. However, I'm not going to provide a detailed explanation of these settings and connections. So if you want a full explanation of the music note creator and the metronome, refer to the professor's Toy Box Tutorials numbers 108 and 109. Now Luke will demonstrate it for us. Okay, we'll take a look at the setup here. Settings I use for the various components to create the Imperial March. So I hooked up a couple buttons to the metronome. One here to start the cycle, and another one here to turn it off. This is all purely done for testing purposes, so cancel immediately. And then we'll take a quick look at the properties here for the metronome. So as I said before, I set my time bar duration to 5 seconds, which slows down the pace of the music and gets a little bit closer to that 103 beats per minute that the song is supposed to be. Impulses at 8, time bars per cycle 2, and that is what's required to meet the 4-second minimum per time bar limitation of the metronome. Only 1 full cycle, and the rest of the settings are left off. And then for the quarter notes, we need to use a time delayer, and it's hooked up to those 2 music note creators. I set the time for this to 0.45. It comes out with those 4s and 9s when it does the math, but I used the setting of 0.045 for the time delayer. And then for this next one, for the second bar, also for the quarter notes, I used the same time delay setting of 0.45 seconds. Excuse me. Alright, we'll take a look at each of the music note creators for each of the notes. So the first one in the first bar here, use the default note of A. And the default octave is at 4, but that's just too high of a pitch, a tone for this song, so I took it down 2 octaves as my bass octave, and I left that at 2. And I used the piano, and for half notes it's 500 milliseconds, and I left my volume at 10. And so for the metronome, it has 4 commands from the metronome. Impulse 1, 2, 3, and 5 for the first time bar. And you can see those there. If you want to recreate this one in one of your Star Wars toy boxes, feel free to pause as necessary. I probably won't talk in full detail for each of these settings because you can see them for yourselves, and you can stop and pause along the way if you want to use my settings to recreate this short little piece of music. It's always a nice little enhancement to your toy boxes. Kind of a fun thing. I'm happy that the professor took the time to provide full tutorials for the metronome and the these music note creators. I wouldn't have been able to do this without his instructions. So you can see there my settings. And instead of using 200 milliseconds for my quarter notes, I use 300 milliseconds. I thought it sounded a little bit better. So when this particular note there is played, it connects to the time delayer to start the time delay. And those are the metronome connections to this music note creator. And here are the properties for the other quarter note, as you can see there. And that goes up an octave to 3. And again, 300 milliseconds is what I chose to use for my quarter notes. Just sounded better to my ears. And when the delay is complete from the time delayer, then it will play that note. So that's using the time delayer is how you get quarter notes in rapid succession. And back to an A note here, back down to octave 2. And this was a whole note, so 1,000 milliseconds. And here's the time, the metronome time bar connections for both time bar 1 and time bar 2. So it plays the final, the 7th impulse. Alright, for the second bar, first note is this E note, and it's going to go up an octave. So the third octave, a half note, 500 milliseconds. And this note gets played 3 times during time bar 2, impulses 1, 2, and 3. It's a repeated note, just like the first note of the first time bar. And we have our first quarter note. It's an F, and it's also on the third octave. Quarter note at 300 milliseconds. And when that note is played, it'll start the time delayer for 0.45 seconds. And the metronome will play this on time bar 2, impulse 4. Alright, our second quarter note, it's C. It's also in the third octave and 300 milliseconds. And when the delay is complete from the time delayer, it will play this second quarter note after the first quarter note was played. And for the final note of the second bar, it's a G sharp A flat, back down to the second octave. And this was actually supposed to be, according to sheet music, a half note. I made an error and made it a whole note at 1,000 milliseconds. So by the sheet music it should be at 500, but I actually liked my little error, and I went ahead and left it at 1,000 milliseconds. I kind of like the way that note rings out for a little bit longer period of time at 1,000 versus 500. But 500 would be the correct setting from the sheet music. And it's time bar 2, and impulse 5. Alright, for the drum roll, I put in this sound creator with a repeater, and the repeater is set to a rate of 3. And that connects to the sound effects generator to repeat, and under the musical category and the drum roll. Now we have to turn on and off this repeater, so that is from the metronome. So when the metronome is started, it will go ahead and turn on this repeater to start the drum roll. And get back into that. And when the last impulse, time bar 2, impulse 5 is played, it'll turn off the repeater. And that will stop the drum roll. And I had one more setting here. This was just for the testing. When I hit the cancel button there to turn off the music, wanted to turn off that repeater, otherwise the repeater would just keep on going. So that was purely for testing purposes. So take one more listen to it here. I think this adds a nice touch to any toy box. And thank you, Professor, for your lessons. Okay, I'll show a short little demonstration here of how I incorporated this piece of music into my toy box. And Luke will approach a trigger area here, which will start the challenge. I like to set these things up as challenges because it allows you to repeat them multiple times without having to exit and return to the toy box each time for the gameplay. So your little cutscene here. This is actually a brand new toy box, not the one I used for my Return of the Jedi project. That toy box I actually lost when I accidentally overwrote it with another Death Star save game of mine. So I took the time to recreate the toy box, made some improvements based upon the lessons I learned the first time of creating it. So Luke here will approach the Emperor. And when he gets in within range of the dynamic trigger, the Emperor will taunt him, and the music note creator plays its little music. Darth Vader drops into the scene here. And the boss fight then begins with Darth Vader. So I won't go through the actual entire fight there, but I'll conclude this portion of the demonstration of how I included the music note creator. I think it adds a little bit of extra pizzazz to a toy box when you can create your own music. And next thing we'll do is go through a tour of this toy box. Before we begin the tour, here's a couple of cutaway graphics I found online that I based the design of the tower and each of its sections on. The first cutaway shows a lot of good details for the throne room section of the tower, where all of the action in Return of the Jedi took place. This second cutaway gives a good look at all 4 cylindrical quadrants of the tower, with the throne room to the far right, what looks to be a stellar cartography section in the near section, the Emperor's conference room and private chamber in the left section, a shuttle docking port in the far section, and the elevators in the central shaft of the tower. Okay, we'll continue here with the tour, starting here in the Emperor's throne room section. So these are all toys that I brought in from the interior toy box. His throne chair, the various computer panels and screens here all came in from the interior. And then the area underneath the floor here. In the movie there were posts that supported the floor, which I didn't include in my original toy box, but in this one I went ahead and added these short pipe climbs as the floor support posts, adding a little bit more realism to it. I'll jump up here on the platform, and kind of cool view out the windows from this vantage point. I also use these pipe climbs to as a support system for this raised walkway. I thought it was the best thing available in the toy box in order to have some sort of logical support system for it. Then down here into the elevator shaft, I changed that. I had used these Death Star elevator pieces all the way down in my original design, but looking at the movie, it wasn't like that. It was more of this lit column that had walkways going back and forth. So I used the Star-Lord's terrain power disc to theme those blocks and made an octagonal shape. I also changed the effect there for the lightning effect that I think makes it look better than the effect that I'd used in my original toy box. And then up here, kind of made my own little cool looking design using basic blocks. And it's these rounded ledge blocks. And I just continued them around in a circular pattern. And then I stacked them up to the ceiling. And I thought the Tron theme looked pretty cool. So not movie accurate, but I was just going for something that looked cool, at least to me. And then of course I added the Death Star light panels here to mimic the light panels on the turbolift shaft there. I also added sound effect and a visual effect for a little bit of a pulse that you'll see occasionally. My original design, this central area wasn't big enough to fit the Death Star pipes, and it was something that I kind of regretted, but I would have had to completely rebuild it anyway. It actually makes this less accurate because there isn't supposed to be an outer walkway. It's just supposed to be the walk paths through the turbo lift area. But I had to make it bigger to fit those Death Star pipes. Here is, I'm using this Nomesian wand. I think it's a pretty good interpretation of what looked to be a stellar cartography area. Also in my original toy box, I just set that on top of the platform. If you look at the cutaway pictures, you can see that it's actually sitting down at the base floor level with the viewer up here at the raised level. So I took the time to redesign this, and a lot of those floor platforms as a result of it, because of the bounding box of the Nomesian wand, I had to put them in with a path creator. But there's enough room to walk around down here, and I think the control panels here looks pretty cool. It's a nice fit for the Emperor's Tower here. So we'll head back over this direction again through the central walkways, and we'll go into the Emperor's conference room in his private chamber. This is something I created for this toy box as well. Some more interior toys that I brought in. Maybe not accurate for the walls, but again, I thought that Tron theme just looked cool in this room, so I went with it. I also put my Emperor character back in here, and when you approach him, this is where I use my music note creator again, so the music will play and he'll shock you, and it's pretty difficult to get a hold of him to get him to stop, so you basically just have to jump out of the way. This, of course, is all deactivated when the boss fight is going on, and then reactivated just for touring the toy box. And then we'll come up here into his private chamber. Again, I tried to follow the cutaway diagrams that I had as closely as possible to create this area. And that's a Death Star style terrain piece that I used a trigger area to embed it into the wall just for visual effect. And this is Odin's bed. I thought at least the shape of it somewhat mimicked the Emperor's resting place. And the bacta tank doesn't really belong here, but it was kind of an empty corner and it kind of looks cool. So I threw it in there. Now the trick is to avoid the Emperor, which I failed to do.
You're not impressing me.
It's still kind of fun. Looks cool, and it sounds cool with the music note creator. Alright, we'll come over here to the last section of the tower. Have some cargo boxes and things in here. And I also made that doorway opening the way I embedded it using the basic blocks, the wall pieces with the using a path creator. I put them a little bit further into the Death Star window to make that door opening smaller, which I think is more realistic and better looking, but it forced me to add these stairs. I also used the fantasy terrain pieces here to create this round opening. What is that from? That's the Tony Stark power disc, terrain power disc that I used. So I just thought that really looked a whole lot better than my original design. So that's a tour of the interior of my toy box, and it's a nice design, something you can use with any larger Death Star design where you're using multiple toy boxes. Like you can have a main Death Star design and then connect to the Emperor's throne room, particularly if you're playing creating games that follow along Return of the Jedi. Last thing we'll do is we'll take an exterior tour of the toy box. Alright, we will finish the tour of my Emperor's Tower toy box here by taking an exterior view. This is the boss fight creator for Darth Vader, and had the terrain blocks here for the ceiling of the tower. And this one here is connected to a replayer. And that's because this box for the boss fight creator is too big to put in there. So I have a connection to the replayer. When Darth Vader is generated, it will clear the replayer, which will cause that terrain block to be removed, and Vader then falls through the ceiling down to the floor, and the boss fight begins. And there's a time delay for 1 second. 1 second after Vader is generated, then that terrain block is played back and it's replaced into the ceiling. This central area here of the upper tower, I have enough space to put all of my all of the creativity toys that are required for the logic and the music note creator, so on and so forth. And these are the canyon wall blocks, of course, set to the Death Star theme. And I added some of those communication components on top. And this is the antenna. That's Fantasy Terrain 4 using the Calhoun's Command terrain power disc. I thought that the way it lights up gave it a cool effect. Down here there were also supports from the tower shaft supporting each section of the each cylindrical section of the tower. So I had not incorporated those into my original toy box design, but I did add them here. I also used basic blocks here to build up the port entrance, docking port for the shuttle. Made that look a little better and more realistic to the screenshots I had. It's kind of a cool view from the outside here with the completed exterior looking down to the Death Star surface. That's why I used that circular path to set a camera to, because it's really the only way to enjoy the exterior in this toy box, because it's meant to be played inside and not outside. So that concludes my demonstration of how I use the music note creator and the metronome to create the first 4 bars of the Imperial March, as well as a brief tour of the toy box. So I hope everyone enjoyed that, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.